This is probably the reason why this channel is what it is. The first laptop I've ever reviewed or let's say made a video about on my channel. Well, not exactly this one, but it was the same model, a Lenovo Z50-70. And today I'm gonna do a quick review of this guy, so let's talk about that.
This is Hubwood.
So the reason for me getting my first Z50-70 in a used condition over eBay back in 2017 was actually that I was looking for a cheap solution to play The Witcher 3 on our camper van trips. Yeah, you heard me. I actually have some old footage from one of these trips, actually playing The Witcher 3 next to our camper, next to the ocean. Why, you might ask? Well, others read books to relax, I play games to relax, that's why. So I was scouting for the minimum mobile GPU that I would need to get around 30 FPS in that game on low settings at 720p just to be able to play it. And focused on the Nvidia 840M, which just happened to be in a Lenovo Z50-70 combined with an i5 4210U with 2 cores and 4 threads, after watching some YouTube videos. While this one has the really only slightly higher clocking i7 4510U with the same core and thread count. So 2 cores, 4 threads, a few megahertz more, that's the difference. And because I was using YouTube back then to check out benchmarks, etc., I actually later started to do that myself to help people deciding whether the performance of a specific mobile hardware would be enough for their needs. Okay, so I actually found this white model here, while my old one was black, in amazing good condition on eBay for 19 euros, which is about $80 or $90, including shipping, which ironically is about exactly as much as I've earned with this first tech video I've ever made back in 2017, despite its over 200,000 views, because I wasn't able to earn money with that video in the beginning since I didn't have enough subscribers and views. Well, I also swapped the 1TB HDD this one came with for a 256GB SSD, SATA SSD, which really made the experience a hell of a lot faster. I really tend to forget how bad HDDs have been. Oh, and the battery was just absolutely dead after 10 years. Was this one. So I actually decided to get a new big third-party battery for 30 bucks, which actually has 50% more capacity than the original battery, but more about that in a bit. Now, since I always sell my old laptops on eBay when I get a new used laptop, I didn't have my original Z50-70 anymore. And I kind of forgot how it felt, and I was quite surprised by the overall actually okayish build quality it has, because back when it was released 10 years ago, in 2014, it did only cost around $700 depending on the configuration. It is mostly plastic, with the area around the keyboard being aluminum or at least some kind of metal. And being a 15-inch laptop, it is huge compared to my Gigabyte Aorus 15 with the same screen size due to its insanely big bezels, which most laptops had back then. So it's actually as big as modern 17-inch laptops. This really is like traveling back in time for me. As laptops back then often still had a service hatch, you can open up the laptops within seconds and get access to the SATA drive, upgrade the RAM, while this one came with a single 8GB DDR3 stick, and I thought, well, what the heck, let's breathe in more life into this laptop. So beside the SSD and the new battery, I also got another basically identical 8GB DDR3 1600 MHz stick for only 15 bucks including shipping, while 16GB surely is kind of overkill for this grandpa. It still could come in handy in some scenarios, and for 15 bucks, I mean, come on. So I've actually spent around 150 euro in total for the laptop, the SSD, the battery and the RAM. But considering the sentimental value and the great condition that this Z50-70 is in, I thought it's worth it keeping it alive for a little bit longer. The keyboard feels a bit mushy and it is unfortunately not illuminated, while I was still able to write properly with it. Also, the touchpad is not very good, and the 2-finger scroll function was actually pretty terrible and imprecise. But I don't know if that's maybe driver related and really can't remember if it was that bad back then. Or if I just have been spoiled by much better trackpads over the years. Also, one of the buttons seemed to be a bit worn out, while still functioning just fine though. Now, connection-wise, on the left side, the Z50-70 offers a VGA port, the power connector, a GB LAN port, an HDMI 1.4a port, a USB 2 port, and one USB 3.0 port. So at least you have the chance to connect something like an extension like a dock or something and get some speed and additional ports. And on the right side there is another USB 2 port and an SD card reader. And yes, it actually has a functioning DVD burner, which for my old Z50-70 I actually swapped out for a second SATA bay with the help of an adapter.
This is what the integrated 720p webcam looks like, and it's not that bad actually. Or should we just state that webcams haven't improved a lot over the years? Because this is probably the same quality that I'm getting in most gaming laptops as of today, if they're not specifically having a better Full HD webcam with AI functions or something like that. Not bad.
The by far biggest issue of this laptop is, and I remember that this already was an issue back when I owned my old Z50-70, is the screen. It is by today's standards, and even back then, a pretty bad screen. It's a glossy Full HD screen for which I only measured 225 nits, and the color accuracy was not good as well. But the worst thing about it is the bad viewing angles. I mean, if you look at a totally black image, for example, it will only appear black in the middle of the screen and gray at the bottom and the top. So any kind of work where that is important is absolutely impossible, unfortunately. And as I said, it's a glossy screen as well, so meh. It just is the laptop's biggest flaw in my opinion, by far. I mean, you can still use it for watching videos, playing games and writing documents, etc. It's not like it's totally unusable. And you know what? Back then I actually tinkered my own foldable sun protector for this laptop with the help of Velcro tape, and I still had that lying around in a storage locker. So I was able to fold it and like this, like I said, with Velcro tape. And then I opened the laptop, which had another stripe of Velcro tape over here. Opened that up and then was able to fixate it and protect the screen from sun, because I was using it for camping. Good times. Oh, and I actually forgot to mention that the laptop is super quiet. You can barely hear it when you're working on it. The fan is just really silent, and even on full load or under full load, it's not that loud. It's really okay actually. But then again, the CPU only manages to pull around 15 watt, so the maximum power draw is around 45 watt for the whole laptop. There's not a lot to cool for the fan and cooling system, but nevertheless, it is very silent. Now, the new third-party 65 watt-hour battery, which I bought on eBay for 30 euros including shipping, is actually pretty big and massive, and therefore also services as some kind of laptop stand, which I think is quite brilliant, to be honest. While the original battery only had 41 watt-hours, but the third-party one was able to score a runtime of around 7 hours and 15 minutes on idle with 50% display brightness and Wi-Fi activated. I usually do that test with 20% brightness of the display, but since the screen is so dark to begin with, I used 50% instead. The low-powered i7 in this thing is able to run pretty efficient for its age, but not as economical as new CPUs. So drawing a total of around 8 to 10 watt is the minimum the laptop can achieve. Watching YouTube at 50% brightness with headphones at 20% loudness resulted in around 4 to 5 hours of runtime. Now, those certainly aren't great results, especially considering this new battery isn't even supposed to have 50% more capacity, but for a 10-year-old used laptop, I wouldn't complain, to be honest. Now, I also ran some performance tests, and in Cinebench on 23, the 2-core and 4-thread CPU achieved a measly 1,445 points, which sounds super terrible when you consider that 10 years later, recent i7 or Ryzen 7 mobile CPUs score like 10 times that. For PC Mark X, I was getting 2,529 points when I was using 8GB of RAM and around 2,620 points with 2 times the 8GB RAM sticks. Now, that's not a lot, but thanks to the SSD, the laptop's responsiveness and usability for daily stuff like browsing the web, YouTube and Microsoft Office is actually okay. I was even able to test some basic video editing with Premiere Pro. I've loaded one of my laptop reviews and was able to replay it in real time without stuttering, even with color grading applied, which is not that bad. PS, what do you think? Is it still worth the €90 or let's say €150 with the new battery and 16GB of RAM and the SSD upgrade as of today? Let me know your thoughts after the video. Now the laptop also comes with a pretty weak but at least dedicated Geforce 840M with 2GB of VRAM in this case. And while it surely won't be able to play recent AAA games, it is still beefy enough for some lighter casual games. And as you will see, upgrading the RAM to 16GB actually helped in some cases. Now, the 3D Mark Firestrike score isn't great to begin with, around 1,400 points for the total score and 1,563 when I slightly overclocked the 840M by 90 MHz. But all the games have been tested without an overclock applied. Now let's begin with some easy stuff. League of Legends at 1080p and ultra settings. I got around 73 to 75 FPS on average and super stable gameplay, even with 8GB only. In Valorant, I was achieving around 50 to 70 FPS at 1080p and low settings with some smaller stutters here and there while still being playable. Considering I'm really not playing this game and I'm really not good at it, it was doable, really. For some casual after work fun, once again, even with 8GB of RAM only. The free-to-play survival game LEGO Fortnite ran pretty okay as well at 1080p with low settings on the Fortnite performance mode with medium view distance, around 40 to 55 FPS, so using higher settings while capping the FPS at 30 is most certainly an option, I guess. Fortnite itself at 720p and the performance mode on low settings was playable to some extent. 16GB helped a bit over 8GB with the 1% lows and stuttering, but from time to time the GPU just seemed to have a total nervous breakdown and dropped its turbo boost to a measly 400 MHz, but I just don't know why. Also, the CPU is the clear bottleneck in this game. I wasn't actually expecting Forza Horizon 5 to work like at all, but it was running better than expected, even with 8GB, even though it would run much better with 16GB. I was testing it at 720p on very low settings with a highly recommended 30 FPS cap, which would help flatten the frame times and prevent stuttering. I mean, it's obviously not great or recommendable, but I really expected worse, to be honest. And I didn't have any issues with loading textures and stuff. And CS2 was actually working as well with around 45 to 60 FPS at 720p and low settings, with a few but manageable stutters here and there in a bot match on Dust 2. I actually think that more people still play these kind of games with similar hardware due to not having any alternatives to that. I also wanted to see if Hogwarts Legacy would start at all and how it would run on the lowest settings at 720p in combination with FSR on ultra performance, and as you can see, it actually started after installing 16GB. And it didn't even seem to have texture loading issues, while it is of course basically unplayable with only around 18 FPS. While I have to point out, it was a very stable 18 FPS actually. It felt weird playing this game on this 10-year-old office laptop though. And last but not least, Rocket League at 720p and medium settings ran with around 60 FPS on average, while the frame time graph didn't look great, but it felt okay and was really playable, which isn't that big of a surprise, I guess. And if you want to see more games on the Z50-70, why not just have a look at my very first tech video on this channel ever? So I'm going to link it in the description and the end card. So considering we are talking about a 10-year-old mid-range like entry-level laptop, it could be worse, I guess. Overall, I actually don't really know if I could objectively rate the experience. I guess I'm just too biased for sentimental reasons when it comes to this laptop. But I'm really glad I acquired and refurbished it. And that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed this little flashback to 2014, or in my case 2017. If you've actually subscribed because of one of my videos back then, thank you for sticking around and encouraging me to keep this channel growing slow but steady. Don't forget to subscribe for more laptop reviews and other stuff if you haven't. Also consider becoming a channel member to be mentioned at the end of my videos for only 99 cents per month. Okay, now thanks for watching, see you next time, bye bye and tschüss.